All right, so today we are doing a repair on a 1960s CT200. The ignition coil went bad, and the way you could tell that was, if you started it up cold, it was kind of a little bit hard to start, but it would start. And then I would check the spark. You could see the spark, and then we'd ride it around for a little bit, come back, it just dies. The bike just dies. We check the car, we check, make sure timing is good, checked again for spark, and there was no spark. So our best guess is that there's a slight crack or something in the ignition coil, and so we have to replace it. And with these old bikes, just the Honda 90s in general, it sits under here, the ignition coil. So you got to drop the engine to get to it. And in order to drop the engine, you got to do a couple things. You got to, first thing, just take the chain off, which is fairly simple. Remove this cover, remove the your foot stand, remove the metal brace that goes here, just the metal cover for the engine, which is that guy. Remove the exhaust. And then basically once that's all done, now you have a lot easier room to just drop the engine and kind of take it off. You're also going to have to disconnect your carb up here, obviously. Maybe play with the fuel lines a little bit if there isn't much flexibility there. But just try to make it as clear and easy as possible for you to drop it without having too much in the way. So once I drop it, I'll show you what it looks like. Alright, so I was like, alright, let's change the ignition coil on it. And on the Honda S90s and the CT90s, I think the CT90s have the same format, it sits right here. So the ignition coil is usually right above the engine, actually attached to the engine. You can see it on this old one here. This is where they sit. So I thought it sat in that same place. So I dropped the engine, and then was rather surprised to see that it wasn't there. It turns out on the CT200s, they sit up here, actually right underneath the gas tank there. And to kind of get to it, you need to take the battery out. Here it's sitting here. Undo two bolts that are up there, two 10mm nuts, and it kind of drops down. And from there, you can pull it out. So that's a good thing to learn. I think you may still actually have to drop the engine because you have to feed through a spark plug wire. And I don't know if that's going to go through fairly easily without dropping it. And it's not that much work to do to drop it. It's more work, but not too bad. Yep, so now I'm going to swap out that ignition coil, which is probably original to the bike possibly, with this ignition coil that we got off eBay. It's still Japanese though, so I think it'll work just fine. But we'll see. I'll put it in the bike and let's see if things work out. The new ignition coil is all hooked up. I don't know if you can see it, but that's it there. Just right up in there. And you can see it coming down here, coming out right there. Focus. Yep, right there. Looked at the old one. I think it's pretty obvious what was going on here. So that wire is not supposed to be disconnected from that solder point. So I'd imagine I could probably solder that back together and this thing probably would work. We already did all the work. We had the part. Might as well put a new one in just to be sure it works. So next step now is putting things reverse order. I'll put the engine back up and on. Let's see if there's anything else. I had to modify the connectors a little bit. It came with one female and one male. This is two male. So I had to just modify it, cut one off and snip one on. Not a big deal, but just a heads up if you don't have the tools or a box full of connectors like this. See if the light will come back. Anyway, so I'll put it back on and then let's see if it works. All right, just got the engine on. I'm almost out of breath from wrestling with this thing. Sometimes they can be a huge pain in the butt to get on and then to get the bolts that hold them on in while you're holding it, especially with one person. I'll share with you a quick trick how I do it. I put this little ratcheting strap on it, go around here, kind of holds it up in the meanwhile. and then I put something underneath it. It's about there. I mean, this thing just got wrecked. Look at this, it went into the spring. You see that? And then basically lift it up and shim it with something like this. You know, like that, until you get it to the point where it's basically level where you want it, and then it's a lot easier to get in. So you got to get these engines in here by yourself. You can't put like a jack or something underneath it. This is a decent way to do it. Again, still not easy. Breaking a sweat here. All right, so just hook the battery back up. Good test before you finish everything else to just make sure you do have spark now. Simple test. Ground the spark plug and hit. Nice, strong spark. Great, so let's finish it up. All right, the bike is done. Got the battery charging. It was a little bit low on juice, I left it on, so I'll charge that up. I'll get it started in a minute. But you know, one tip for getting kind of the skid plate on, and I struggled with it a lot the first time when I had to take the clutch off this bike, is essentially like this is kind of like a torque bent. You know, it's not like perfectly flat. You really have to like bend it into place. So I put it on the ground and I just bent it a little bit back. It helps so much. And the trick is you want to get these bolts in first. So put these ones in, not tight, just put them in. We lost the top one, so ignore that one. The other two on the other side are there. And then just tighten these down and the whole thing kind of straightens out on itself. So if you're having trouble with it, again, start there, put those in, or bend it back if you need it, put those in, and then put these bottom bolts in. Yeah, cool. So let's start this old CT200, see what happens.